الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته ومنتهى علمه وجميع ما شاء وخلق وذرى وبارك عالم الغيب وشهادة الرحمن الرحيم الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم أرسله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون أما بعد فيقول الله تعالى في كتابه يا أيها الذين آمنوا أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم فإن تنازعتم في شيء فردوه إلى الله ورسوله صدق الله العظيم. Alhamdulillah, we thank and we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the ni'mah or for the blessing of al-Islam. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the protections that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has embedded within this beautiful way of life called al-Islam. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for promising to protect not only his book but his deen in ways that he didn't promise or guarantee the former Ummah or the former nations that preceded the Ummah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Last week, we talked about Islamic belief. And we talked about the uncomfortable truth about what many of us have been led to believe is proper Islamic belief. And I attempted to do that in a way that was not too high level. I tried to keep it very simple. And in my attempts at doing that, I utilized a parable similar to an analogy of identity theft. I talked about how in identity theft, someone or a group of people, they take on the identity of someone else. They pretend to be that person or people. Usually for the purpose of making some money or maybe of evading law enforcement. And I also included within that, even though it's not considered identity theft, I also included in that the situation where sometimes a child is taken at birth. Maybe there was a mix-up in the hospital and the wrong parents brought the child home. Or maybe the child was adopted at a very young age and the adopted parents kept the situations hidden or secret from them, or situations like that. For the purpose of the analogy, I included all of that under identity theft. And the point was, just like in identity theft, those who are tricked by the criminal, the one who is pretending to be someone else, usually suffer some harm. Like if someone steals your identity, they can get credit cards in your name, mess up your credit, do crimes in your name, and then you end up getting arrested. Don't let them sit together. Don't let them sit together. You could be minding your business and police pull you over. You think you're going to get a ticket for turning without a signal or something minor, and the next thing you know, the officer has his hand on his gun telling you to get out the car. And then you realize you had a warrant out for your arrest for all these different things that you know you didn't do. Why? Because someone stole your identity. And that can harm you. We said we connected to it, the situation, with someone growing up thinking that these parents and this family is his biological family. And then something happens when he gets older and he realizes, this is not my parents. What happened? Who lied to me? And this is usually really painful, because sometimes it could have been an honest mistake. It might not be the adopted parent's fault. Maybe the nurse at the hospital switched the name tags on the bassinet. But usually people who go through that, for whatever reason, they get extremely mad because they realize that their whole childhood was based upon a lie. And then the person is usually like, well, who am I? I want to know who my real parents are. And you may think, oh, is he talking about some TV show? This happens a lot, especially in our community. How many times has a woman raised a child and lied to that child about who the father is? And then the child grows up realizing that, oh, this person ain't my father. Or, no, the reason why I kept you from your father is because he's a bad guy. And then you grow up and to find out and to learn that the father wasn't a bad guy. He didn't want to stay away from you. He was kept away from you by your mother or by her family. How many people we know have grown up in similar situations? In any case, that person feels like his identity has been tampered with. Everything he thought about himself is not true. So the person is forced to reevaluate who they are. And a lot of us are experiencing that in Islam right now. Last week we talked about belief, because there's been people who have taken on the identity of Islam. And they have been able to promote what they call Islam. And a lot of us are waking up like, this is not Islam. It's not Islam. And we gave some examples. Like some of us, even though we're Muslim, our belief is similar to that of the Christians. Like, for example, the Christians, they have a prayer. Our Father, thou art in heaven. Our Father, our Father, meaning God, Allah. We don't call Allah that. In heaven. Allah is not in heaven. He's not in a place. Allah is not like his creation. You may say, well, that's what it says in the Quran. No, number one, most of you are reading in English. That's what it says in English in the Quran. And even if you read the Arabic, that's not what it's saying in Arabic. And we gave examples of that. And even if it could be interpreted to mean something like that, you're not allowed to understand it that way. And we talked about that last week. Some non-Muslims give God human attributes. He has a face. He has a hand. He has a shin. In fact, he's going to put the shin in the hellfire. Some Muslims believe this. They're making Allah like a human being. Because you've been tricked. The Islam you thought you had is not Islam. And a lot of us, we don't want to face the reality. Another way you can tell, because there's signs, and I gave the example. I believe I used my brother Abdullah as an example. Someone stole his identity. He's running around pretending to be Abdul Mujib. But most of all of us sitting here, we know Abdul Mujib. If someone else, I don't care if he's light-skinned. Don't care if he's got long hair. I don't care if he's from the Mon Valley. Don't care. We know you're not Abdul Mujib. We know him. We will call Abdul Mujib and say, listen, there's this dude pretending to be you. He actually looks a lot like you, but we know he's not you. Watch out. Why will we know? Because we know the actual person. Someone that doesn't know him, if I said, listen, I know the real Abdul Mujib. He's this, he's that, he's this, he looks like this, that, and the third. And I go to the other person who doesn't know him personally, he may say, yeah, that's the same person I met. Even though it's not. It's too similar. You got to know some details, some things you can't describe with words. If he looks so much like him, I can describe Abdul Mujib to the T. And that other person will still be fooled. Naeem knows him. And he described the person I met. Even though it's not really Abdul Mujib. And so those of us who know what real Islam looks like have to inform others. And we have to make it clear. And we also have to give you tools by which to spot, to pinpoint, to red flag. You know how you're dealing with, some things come up on the computer, it gets flagged. Think about this. There's certain characteristics that come up with the imposter Islam, the one who's stolen the identity of Islam. When you see it, a red flag should pop up. Whoa, flag this. One of the things that should pop up, if when they're teaching you Aqidah, or Tawheed, or the proper Islamic belief, and they say Tawheed, oneness, is three. The oneness of Allah's essence, Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, oneness of Allah's lordship, and oneness of Allah's attributes, red flag. Red flag. That classification, that division was first introduced, and it was only two at first. It was introduced in the 2nd century of Islam, 7th century of Islam. And it was done for a reason, which we're going to talk about next week. The reason why it was done was to enable or to justify the killing of Muslims. Because there are certain practices in Islam that the Prophet ﷺ taught, but it didn't logically meet up with some well-known figures in Islam, so they wanted to anathematize. They wanted to find a way to call Muslims kafir by doing this. So they said, like the mushriks, the pagans of Arabia during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. They say they believe in Allah, but they worship idols. So likewise, the Muslims be doing the same thing. They do the same thing. They believe in Allah, but they're still mushriks. So they cool with Tawheed or Rububiyyah, but they not cool with Tawheed or Uluhiyyah. So they make this false, and people do this all the time. People have an opinion, and when reality doesn't line up with their opinion, they change the reality to line up with their opinion. And so this enabled them to justify killing other Muslims. You wonder why all of these so-called terrorist groups, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, they all read the same books. And most of the time, the only people they attack is Muslims. Why? Because they say they're not Muslims, they're Kafirs. And this is part of the same reason why Muslims can't get along in the United States. But the Muslims here don't have any authority. Those Muslims who have that opinion, they don't have any authority. The Kuffar have the authority. So they just say, the rest of us, we're deviants. But if they had authority, if they had weapons, and they didn't have to worry about repercussions, like Boko Haram, ISIS, and Al-Qaeda, most of us would be dead. Because they said we're kuffar. Our blood and our property is halal. Why? Because they say we're mushriks. What's the foundation of that? This Trinitarian Tawheed. That's why I said red flag. The Sahaba didn't teach Tawheed like this. The Tabi'een didn't teach Tawheed like this. The Tabi'een didn't teach Tawheed like this. The 4th generation, the 5th generation, 6th generation, they didn't teach Tawheed like that. That classification, that breakdown, along with the justification supporting it, is a newly invented matter. So therefore it's run it's rejected. So that's red flag. And we mentioned giving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala human qualities and characteristics. So our job is to help you, to give you tools, to flag, or so that you become aware that, listen, something ain't right here. And listen, you may not like me, or you may not even trust me. But if you care about your deen, if Islam is really that important to you, and you believe this is your heaven and hell, you may not even believe me. Research it, though. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. He can't hear you, he's deaf. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa afdalu salatu wa atamu taslim ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wa radiyallahu ta'ala an sadat al-tabi'in wa ulama al-amalin وأئمة الأربعة المجتهدين ومقلدين إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. Another one of the characteristics of those who have stolen the identity of Islam is they have a slogan. And they say, we only follow Quran and Sunnah. And a lot of us have adopted that slogan, not thinking about what it means in reality. What Muslim doesn't follow Quran and Sunnah? I mean, have you thought about that? What Muslims say, you know what? I'm not following the Quran and the Sunnah. I shouldn't ask that because there's some crazy people out there. But Allah himself says in the Quran, O you who believe, obey Allah and obey his messenger and those charged with authority among you. And if you differ among yourselves, refer back to Allah and his messenger. All over the Quran, Allah says obey or follow Allah and his messenger. So even if someone claims to follow the Quran, but they don't follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they're not even really following the Quran. It's not like one or two ayat that say follow the messenger. The messenger is the best pattern for you to follow. Just repeat over and over again. If someone tells you that, they just playing. They following somebody's slogan. They're not really thinking too deeply about what they're saying. But we have been misled and tricked by the same people who taking on the identity of Islam and giving Allah all of these human characteristics and putting them in a place and giving them body parts. They say, we follow the Quran and Sunnah, most of them, and we don't follow madhabs. Now, I'm doing no madhab thing. I follow Quran and Sunnah. What? I have a question for you, and I know most of you think like this, and it's not your fault. I have a question for you, and I want you to think. Were you there when the Prophet ﷺ received the Quran? If you are, you're an old brother. No, you wasn't there. Were you there when the Prophet ﷺ spoke? No, you wasn't. So you say you follow Quran and Sunnah. Really? You're really following your nafs. You know what? A few years ago, they found an old manuscript of the Quran. I forgot. I think they found it in Turkey or someplace like this. And it was like breaking news. Do you know what all of the Muslim scholars were saying when that happened? This old manuscript confirms and verifies the Quran that the Muslims have already. All of the Muslim scholars were saying like, so? That's not a big deal to us. The Quran is the uncreated speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's one of Allah's attributes. This right here is even technically not the Quran. They call this Mus'haf. It's the printed word. It's a creation. It's a representation of Allah's speech. It's not in actuality Allah's speech. The Quran is not transmitted from printing press to printing press. The Quran is transmitted from human to human. Orally. When someone memorizes the Quran, he recites what he memorized in front of his teacher, and they verify it. We don't care what somebody wrote by their hand or what the printing press printed. So when they found this old ancient manuscript of the Mus'haf, the Muslim scholars were saying, so what? Like Imam Tariq used to say, whoop-de-doo. It was no big deal. So when someone tells you that they're following the Quran and the Sunnah, what they're really telling you, even if they don't understand it themselves, is that we're going to skip skip the isnad, the chain that connects us back to Allah and His Messenger, and we're going to interpret the Quran how we see fit. And Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak he's a famous, well-known tabi'i. And this statement I'm about to mention, you can find in Sahih Muslim. It's in his introduction. And he says, "In al-isnad min ad-deen." Verily, the isnad is part of the deen, the chain of authority, the connection. وَلَوْ لَا الْإِسْنَادُ لَقَالَ مَنْ شَاءَ مَا شَاءَ. Without it, people will say whatever they want to say. The isnad is part of the deen. In al-isnad min ad-deen. Verily, the isnad is of the deen. Who said this? Abdullah ibn Mubarak. Who was one of his teachers? Imam Adam Abu Hanifa. Who was one of his teachers? Al-Hamad. Who was one of his teachers? Ibrahim al-Nakhai. Who was one of his teachers? Al-Qamah ibn Qais. Who was one of his teachers? Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Who was his teacher? Radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The isnad is part of the deen. What the people are saying, the people that say that, they want to replace the chain with them. See, a lot of us are arrogant. We think, well, I read it and it means what I think it means. Does your understanding of what you read line up with how the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam understood it? Or you don't care, you're just arrogant. It's just me. This is American or Western arrogance. I'm still Muslim, so what if my understanding contradicts the one who the Quran was revealed to? So what? Quran and Sunnah. That's a slogan, and it's loaded. All Muslims follow Quran and Sunnah. But how you want to get back to this Quran and Sunnah? None of us were there when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had the Quran revealed to him and spoke and commented on it. None of us. So all of us are trusting someone. All of us are trusting someone. But who do you trust? Say, I don't follow no method. I follow Quran and Sunnah. Usually when people say that, they talk about Bukhari and Muslim, as if they know other hadith collections. Red flag. Bukhari and Muslim follow methods. You don't follow a method, but you follow Quran and Sunnah. And what you mean by that is Bukhari and Muslim. Bukhari and Muslim follow a method, but you don't follow no method. You see how we contradict ourselves? And most of us don't know that. Why? Because someone stole the identity of Islam, and this is the Islam that they're giving us. And a lot of us grow old in Islam, and we're like, you know what? I'm too old to change right now. I'm too old and too lazy. It's been working for me so far, I ain't changing. You know what they say? Old people get stuck in their ways. You can't teach a dog new trick. Old dog new tricks. And if he's real, it hasn't been working, but he's going to keep doing it anyway. I think they say Einstein called that insanity. Islam is supposed to produce something. And when it's not producing it, you just keep doing it. None of you wouldn't even do that at work. You know what? I'm going to go to work. I'm going to put in my 40 hours. And then when payday comes 2 weeks later, net pay, 0. I'm not even going to ask what's wrong. I'm just going to do the exact same thing I did before this week. No, none of us would do that. We would go to human resources. Yo, why my paycheck say 0? I work. We want an explanation. Is it child support? Is it this? Is it that? I didn't punch in. What did I do wrong? We wouldn't go to work another day until our money is right. See, we value money more than we value our Islam. We read the history books and we see what Islam did for the Sahaba. We see what Islam did for the early generations. And we see that it's not producing the same thing for us, but we still keep doing it. We don't figure out what's wrong. But that's part of what's wrong. We've been tricked. So we follow Quran and Sunnah, but it's really hodgepodge. We're just making this thing up as we go. And it's really my opinion. That's why all of us, we all have a different Islam. I got my Islam, you got your Islam, you got his Islam, she got her Islam. Because we also call following Quran and Sunnah. That's why none of us come to class, because we think we already know what we need to know. And we think, oh, you know, Ahlus Sunnah wal Jamaa'ah. And we just want to make clear, some of you may wish to stay in that state because you think it's worked for you all of these years, but we're not doing that here. Here, we're Ahlus Sunnah wal Jamaa'ah, as it has been described and explained by our scholars. What does that mean? In creed, with Ashari and Maturidi. What do you mean in creed and belief? You follow the belief made up by Imam Abu Hassan al-Ashari? No! They codified it, they classified it, they didn't make anything up. In practice, outward practice, we're Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, and Hanbali. In this particular administration, we Maliki. And this is what we teach. We said, but that's not Quran and Sunnah. Why is that Quran and Sunnah? Imam Malik learned from Nafi. Nafi learned from Abdullah ibn Umar. Abdullah ibn Umar learned from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Where's your isnad? Oh, I learned from Google, who learned from Microsoft, who learned from... Where's your isnad? I could name some names, but I don't want to do that this week. Because even if I name some human names, it still would be a broken isnad. And we follow Tasawwuf, Sufi. You know how some of y'all spell it S-O-O-F-E-E. Them deviant Sufi. Yes, we Sufi. And this is what we are here. Ahlus Sunnah wal Jamaa'ah. We're not on no makeup, make-believe, 21st century stuff. We're not no Wahhabis. Just to spell it out for you, Wahhabi who rebranded themselves as Salafi, we're not that. We're against that. And if you want to argue and debate that, we can do that. We're not none of that. Those are the ones who stole the identity of Islam. Those are the ones who put Allah in place. Those are the ones who broke up Allah's oneness into three parts. Those are the ones who put Allah in place. Those are the ones that say Allah has a literal shin. Those are the ones who say Allah is literally going to come down on the last third of the night and every night ask who's waiting for your dua. And it's the last third of the night every place on earth. What is he, like on a bungee cord or something? Up, down, up, down, up, down. We want to translate everything literally. When Allah clearly said in Surah Al-Imran that some verses are muhkam, some verses are literal, and some verses are mutashabih. They're allegorical. You can't translate everything literally. But as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about some of the desert Arabs, أَكْثَرُهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ, most of them have no sense. Surah Hujurat. Like one of the scholars from Ahlus Sunnah was debating one of those Wahhabi scholars. And he said, oh, everything's literal, or everything's literal. Well, Allah talks about in the Quran about those who, who will be resurrected, who are blind in this world, going to be resurrected blind in the next life. The Wahhabi Sheikh was blind. He said, you're going to be, Allah talk about you? No, that's not literal. Oh, now it's not literal. So we need to make it clear. This is what we're about here. This is what we teach here. This is what we're classical Islam. None of that other funny stuff. Even if you've been doing it for 5 or 10 or 30 years. Ahlus Sunnah wal Jamaa'ah. And we follow, as we said lastly, we follow the purification of the heart, what is called tasawwuf, or as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam expressed it, ihsan. A lot of you got a problem with the word tasawwuf or Sufi. Well, the Prophet didn't use the word tasawwuf. Well, he didn't use the word tafsir. You ain't got a problem with that, right? He didn't use the word Sirah to describe his biography, but you ain't got a problem with that, right? You only have a problem with the word Tasawwuf because the one who stole the identity of Islam told you there was a problem with the word Tasawwuf. You've been brainwashed. You need to kick them adopted parents to the curb. And they didn't adopt you, they stole you at birth and corrupted your understanding from the beginning. You just have to care enough about your Islam and enough about your hereafter to find out who you really are and what Islam really is. You say that's what most people are here on. Here, yes. Everything about this environment is controlled. Think about it. But we ran out of time. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. Ya Allah, please protect us from the tricks of the shaitan. Please protect us from those who intend to corrupt our Islam. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام تبارك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.